Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah, Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. It is Femme Friday, May 21st. There is a simple reason why Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy are trying to kill the creation of an independent commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection. Think about it. If you had made a pact with the devil, and then the devil came up behind you and wreaked havoc on you and everyone around you, leaving 5 people dead, would you want a full and independent exploration of how that happened? Of course not. Well, that is exactly what happened January 6th. And Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and most congressional Republicans made a pact with the devil. They traded their political souls to embrace the devil's lie. The devil known to you as Donald J. Trump. Like most Faustian bargains, the devil came calling to collect. The moment was when Donald Trump told his followers to march on the Capitol and stop the Congress from validating the election of Joe Biden. Stop the steal, Trump demanded. Except that there had been no steal, not any steal. The election was not just fair, it was a triumph of voter participation. Trump's supporters and his opponents turned out in record numbers. And of course, Biden beat Trump. And Mitch McConnell knew it, and Kevin McCarthy knew it, and they've acknowledged it. But Trump could not stop lying. And then they collaborated. And we all know what that led to. Trump supporters stormed the Capitol and, among other atrocities, went searching for the vice president to kidnap or murder him for doing his constitutional duty to preside over the electoral vote count. As a national nightmare, this is right up there with the assassination of JFK or the attacks on 9/11. Both were explored by independent bipartisan commissions. 9/11 Commission has become a modern day model of how to attempt to heal a deep wound by sharing the truth, even in a partisan environment. In that spirit, 2 honest legislators, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican, agreed to create a bipartisan commission, equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, to dig in to the January 6th insurrection and report back by the end of this year. Their plan passed the House earlier this week with 35 Republicans voting for it. 35 Republicans who may have remembered when these people stormed their offices and stole their things and threatened to kill them. But now Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy are fighting the agreement. McConnell has warned Republican senators that this commission could be a Trojan horse, concealing Democratic plots to keep Republicans from taking back Congress next year. Okay. He's urging Republicans to kill the commission in the Senate. But McConnell's challenge in next year's election is not the commission. It is the truth that this commission would highlight. McConnell and McCarthy don't want us talking about their pact with the devil that produced the insurrection, that incited the insurrection, which is why the majority leader in the House, Steny Hoyer, called the effort to kill the commission a cover-up.
This is about our democracy. This is about an insurrection that was instigated and undertaken to stop the counting of votes for president of the United States in America. It was a profound event. And we need a commission composed of equal numbers, as we've done, as McCarthy asked for, with equal authority about subpoenas, that there have to be agreement on subpoenas. That's what McCarthy asked for. The only thing that McCarthy didn't get, and McConnell I don't know what McConnell wanted or didn't want, was to look at a lot of other things to distract and dissemble and to diminish the focus on this insurrection that occurred, stopping the counting of votes for president of the United States. So I think frankly, it's a cover-up. It's fear of what the truth might be. It's a hear no evil, see no evil approach to January 6th, which was a profound, tragic event in American history, a unique event in American history. And we need to look at all the facets of it so that we do not allow it to happen again.
Donald Trump is a stain on our country and a stain on the Republican Party, an already stained Republican Party. The only way to remove that stain is to acknowledge the truth of what happened. And they won't even acknowledge that, let alone investigate it. And for Donald Trump's collaborators to face the reality and come clean, the commission is a fair way to tell the truth and seek reconciliation for what we have left of our democracy. But killing the commission does just the opposite. The devil is out of the office, but he still has his claws buried deep in Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. And I will let them worry about their own souls, but I am worried about our country. We cannot have a two-party system and one party desperately pandering to a radical small fringe by embracing lies and fake narratives and using gerrymandering to keep that fringe together. But that is what is happening right now. The insurrectionists are not this country. They're not even conservatives in America. Yet the Republicans are trying to bury an honest commission to avoid outing this piece of their base and their connection to it. There's an even scarier example right now. The Republican pandering to their base, the same base, the anti-vaxxers, the COVID deniers, is going to get people killed. I was on Fox News last night explaining that progressives have been unequivocal in our fight against Big Pharma. Big Pharma brought us the opioid epidemic. Big Pharma said that they needed big profits to pay for research and then spent those profits on marketing and stock buybacks and shareholders. Big Pharma will make a lot of money from the COVID-19 vaccines. Big Pharma has earned our skepticism, and I'm glad that the right suddenly sees this, unless it's an excuse. The way that Bernie Sanders and Katie Porter have seen this for a long time, but that does not mean that vaccines against COVID-19 do not work. And they only get better if they invest more in research and development. And the right campaign, but the right campaign against the vaccine, the right's campaign, against the vaccines is putting politics ahead of our public health. They want to continue this fight against COVID. They want to drag it out because it's a wedge issue, except it's a wedge issue that puts people at risk. A wedge issue like the January 6th insurrection, like steal the vote, that was a wedge issue that put our democracy at risk and the lives of our lawmakers, including the vice president, at risk. This is a wedge issue that puts the global health at risk. Yet holding the two thoughts of holding Big Pharma accountable for big profits and saying, oh my God, science works. It just seemed to be too much for Fox News last night. Let's show this clip.
I think that you on the left have found a very unique time on an emergency use application vaccine that has complete liability protection to switch to all of a sudden have an about face on your trust in Big Pharma. And I think you did it. Because you thought it was a win over Republicans. That's all. Nothing more, nothing deeper.
The Republicans want to keep their base. See, what's happening right now is you guys want to prolong. The pandemic is ending, and you want to keep everybody angry at COVID and the assault on freedom because you have to wear masks. God forbid you have to keep your community safe and your grandmother safe. You want to keep that going because it's been working.
I got to run, Nomiki. I want to say two things. I thank you for coming on the program. I always enjoy a spirited exchange of ideas, and I think that what I'm standing up for tonight is independent Americans having the ability to make freedom of choice, specifically on the very intimate decision of what they inject into their bodies. Thank you, Nomiki.
Really? There are so many things progressives and conservatives now agree on. The threat of Big Pharma, at least today, is one of those. But the Republican Party's desperate need to polarize, to hold their minority coalition together in the face of reality, is endangering our health, both our personal health and our political health. We need a vaccine for that. We have an amazing show today. It is Femme Friday. We have Hadas Theer and Julia Rock here. But before that, we have Sumaya Awad, who's going to talk about the situation in Palestine. She has written the book, the tutorial on Palestine. We will be right back after this break with Sumaya.
So you're against murdered children?
We'll start tonight in the Middle East, where Israel...
What? Israel isn't supposed to defend itself?
Oh yeah, if Mexico bombed Texas, will we exercise
What other country is held to the same standard as Israel?
People that want to destroy our terrorists? What's the matter with you? It's the only democracy in the Middle East, you turd!
Self-hating Jew?
That was weird. Anyway, what I was saying was last Thursday saw the start of a new ground offensive launched by Israel.
Oh, the Palestinians have a country! It's called Jordan, you turd!
Tradition! Tradition!
Holy look, obviously there are many strong opinions on this issue, but just merely mentioning Israel or questioning in any way the effectiveness or humanity of Israel's policies is not the same thing as being pro-Hamas.
So you're against murdered children?
Free Gaza! Free Palestine!
The Zionist pig!
You know what?
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I am very excited and honored to have Samaya Awad join us today. She is the co-editor of Palestine, a socialist introduction from Haymarket Books, and she's director of strategy at the Dala Justice Center. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really just very grateful to you, and just so you know, you're on mute.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be back.
So this is a, what day are we on now? Day 11, 12 of the well, there's a ceasefire, but let's start with that. What does a ceasefire look like? What's the reality of that? How did it happen behind the scenes, as far as you know?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that this ceasefire just means that Israel stopped its carpet bombing of Gaza. It doesn't mean that it's stopped its blockade on Gaza. It doesn't mean that it's stopped the police brutality we're seeing right now in Jerusalem happened just today, despite the ceasefire. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's ended its occupation of any of the Palestinian cities and towns and villages that is continuing to occupy, or that it's ceased its control of Palestinian people or its oppression. So it's actually a very, very small win in the grand scheme of things, which is that it's just not bombing Palestinian families every day, nonstop, day and night. So that's the first thing. I think that the reason the ceasefire happened is because of actually the resistance that Palestinians put up. The fact that there were protests across Palestine, across occupied Palestine, which hasn't actually happened in decades, where in Gaza, in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in 48 occupied Palestinian cities in Israel rose up together with a unified call saying, we demand the end to the settler colonial project. We demand our freedom, our liberation from the river, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which is all of Palestine, which is what Israel colonized in 1948 and is continuing to colonize today. So I think it's their resistance that pressured Israel. I think it's the protests we saw here in the US across the country where hundreds of thousands of people rose up. And I think all of this also pressured Congress to act. So the resolution that was brought to the House by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Mark Pocan saying we want to stop this latest arms deal, this $735 million in weapons to Israel. We want to stop that. And Bernie Sanders just yesterday introduced, accompanied with a motion that was brought to the Senate floor and that now the Senate has to vote on. I think all of this was pressure on Israel to agree to a ceasefire.
And of course, Netanyahu has been exacerbated. He's worried about his own political situation. So there are these political forces that we've talked a lot about on the show in terms of the dynamics that have led to this recent set of attacks that, you know, to any sane person seems out of his mind. The fact that this sophisticated military that has advanced weaponry that can, knows exactly who they're targeting, thinks it's totally fine it's not fine to bomb anybody, let's just be very clear, but in the political context, it's fine to bomb journalists because, it's the arguments they're not being, the old stale arguments are not being bought by the general public and the political community now. But it seems as if he's only pushing that far, not because he's completely out of touch, but because his own situation in his own country is so tenuous. Do you think that Netanyahu will get through this and that this situation with the ceasefire, was it a Band-Aid? Is he just going to kind of weather this crisis and continue on, but scale back a little bit? I mean, did you see what I'm saying here? Like, Is this a tipping point, or is it really just like they're gonna do whatever they can to get through and then continue on?
So I think it was definitely a defeat for Netanyahu. That's why people like Israelis, Jewish Israelis, are frustrated and are angry because this was a defeat. And it's happening at a time where right now in Israel, the Israeli population is increasingly right-wing. And that's really saying something, right? Because it's a settler colonial state. So, the settlers are right-wing because of the nature of what they're doing there, the fact that they're on this colonized land and participating in this colonization project, but they're increasingly right-wing and unabashedly so. So there is no left in Israel anymore. It's so small, whatever anti-Zionist formations exist, that they don't actually have any power or any sway. And I think what that means is Netanyahu has been trying to figure out how to respond and keep this right-wing happy. And that's part of the reason why he bombed Gaza, part of the reason why the police brutality we're seeing in Jerusalem, in Haifa, in Lid, and in the occupied West Bank has really increased. The fact, like you were saying, they're shooting journalists, like point blank. They're shooting journalists on TV, like, the journalist is recording as they're being shot. Or in Gaza, that they shot down, or they bombed this media tower, that they bombed roads leading to hospitals. I think it all shows this crisis that's actually unfolding in Israel. And what Netanyahu's going to do, and Benny Gantz, his rival, although they both agreed about the bombing in Gaza, I actually think that we're going to have to see what happens, because they have one of two choices. One is that internally it's going to fall apart. Israeli society is going to fall apart, and it's going to allow for this opening of Palestinian resistance and unified Palestinian resistance, but that will come at a cost. Already 200 people have died in Gaza. Already a 17-year-old was shot and killed during protests in al-Fahim. 17 years old, shot in the head. So they knew what they were doing. So I think it's going to become more right-wing, and Palestinians are going to pay a price, but it also means that there's going to be renewed resistance. And I think there's this awakening that's happening where these Palestinian youth are really leading the charge. It's not connected to the Palestinian Authority, to the PLO. It's not connected to any particular political party or so-called Palestinian leadership. It's actually just Palestinians on the ground. And then, of course, in the diaspora, organizing and pushing for our liberation.
Staying on politics for a second, what is the dynamic right now between the PLO and the people of Palestine? I mean, there's the talking points. We know that there's a heavy leaning towards, the propaganda that's coming out. So let's let's like give people tools. What is really going on? What is, are the Palestinian people what are the political dynamics internally, I guess is the best question to dismantle the talking points.
So I think there's actually no trust in the Palestinian Authority right now by Palestinians, or at least the majority of Palestinians. There's definitely, the Palestinian Authority does not have a popular mandate in any way, shape, or form. And that's actually part of the reason that they canceled the elections that were supposed to happen in May, that were supposed to happen around now, actually, that were canceled. It's because they know they wouldn't win, that the parties in place, Fatah, would not win. And it's because they're so corrupt. They take a lot of the funding that comes in. You know, there's this whole NGO complex that is just disastrous and has been disastrous for the majority of Palestinians who are workers, who are refugees in Palestine. And they also coordinate and cooperate with the Israeli security agencies to detain Palestinians, surveillance, and otherwise. And that's why in Sheikh Jarrah, which was sort of the center of what triggered what we've seen in the last 2 weeks, when a member of the PA was going to come visit, as sort of like a political figure, the community in Sheikh Jarrah said, we don't want anyone that cooperates with the Israeli security to visit us. And they actually released a statement about that. And this is really, really important because it's this new chapter in Palestinian resistance. And as the strike that was organized on Tuesday this week, the Unity Intifada is what it was called, where over 2 million Palestinians participated. In their manifesto that they released, they specifically said, this is Palestinians on the ground across Palestine rising up together. This is a new awakening. This is a new chapter. We don't want to work with, apologize, or justify the actions of the so-called Palestinian leadership that have been speaking on our behalf, that are trying to fragment us, that are working with the Israeli occupation. And I think this is a really, really, really important shift. And I think really does signify that we're in a new moment.
That's incredible. Okay, so right now, people have seen the maps of how much of Palestine has been taken over by Israel over the last 70 or so years. How much has happened in the last, since Netanyahu has been in power?
Since Netanyahu has been in power, settlement expansion in the West Bank has gone up by several tens of thousands, and so has the brutality against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. In terms of the number of people dying, the olive groves set on fire, the fact that settlers are emboldened to do whatever they want, knowing there are no consequences, knowing no one will really be held accountable, and things will just stall in these hollow, fake investigations. In some ways, like what happens in the U.S. sometimes after a police officer murders a black or a brown person in this country. There's these investigations that go on and on. So it's similar to that. And then, of course, in Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel continue to be forced into second-class citizenship. You know, they don't have any rights. And I think all of this has actually been entrenched. And the blockade on Gaza has been entrenched. Netanyahu has been in power for the majority of the time that the blockade has been on Gaza. And I don't think that's a coincidence. But it's also important to note that Netanyahu is not an anomaly, that this has actually been what Israel's state project has been for 73 plus years. It's been 73 years of Israel trying to erase Palestinians, literally to just wipe them off that map that we see floating around everywhere now on Twitter. They're not trying to have them assimilate, not at all. They're not trying to have them adapt. They're not trying to just bring them in. They're actually just trying to erase the Palestinian identity. And of course, the U.S. is complicit in all of this because of the funding that it gives Israel, because of the Israel lobby in the U.S. and the power of that, because of the arms industry that the U.S. Profits from. And that's why the shifts right now we're seeing in the media, where Palestinians are able to talk in their own voice about what's happening to them, is actually pretty huge. Whereas before, anytime you mentioned Palestine or Palestinians, you had to qualify it. You couldn't just talk about it openly.
And before, when we say before, I mean, this is like a year ago, not even a year ago. It's incredible to see this shift. It's incredible to see, Rashida Tlaib in Congress speaking personally about her experience, her family's experience. So we have an opportunity right now to talk to a left audience about what it's like to live in Gaza. Can you explain sort of the conditions in this situation, like as the bombs were coming in, but also, I mean, I've seen stories, friends who have had personal stories where their family members have traded kids in their households to protect the line of, so during these conditions, the last 11 days, what have people had to go through? Is there any place safe to go? What are some of the stories that you're hearing?
So the first thing I'll say is, for anyone listening, there are so many people in Gaza that have been reporting from the ground on Twitter about their daily life experiences. And one person to follow that I think can link to a lot of these people, his name is Jihad Abu Salim. Look him up, follow him. But some of the stories that were coming out of Gaza, the first thing is that Israel was bombing blindly, insofar as there was no actual target. Anywhere was a target. And this is a state, this is, one of the strongest, they're very equipped technologically. They can do precision strikes if they wanted to. Instead, they're shooting all these, or they're bombing all these residential buildings. Carpet bombing is what you call it, because they just level entire neighborhoods gone. Roads to hospitals, killing doctors, killing men and women and children. I think this is also important to mention. It's not women, just children and women that are being killed and that we should be shocked and horrified by, but also the men that are killed. There's this Islamophobia that goes around that, it's less okay if it's a woman or a child, but it's more okay if it's a man. And I think this is part of feeding into this narrative of what is Hamas, and Hamas is everywhere in Gaza, and that's why it's sometimes okay to bomb certain buildings and not others, as opposed to, no, we should be against all the bombing that's happening in Gaza, because Gaza is under blockade. It's under occupation. Yeah. It's a settler colonial project. And any talk of resistance that Palestinians put up, no matter if we agree with it strategically, any of the resistance they put up has to be understood in the context of occupation. If someone comes to your home and takes it over and then brings some random family member from across the ocean and says, hey, this is our home now, you're going to resist. Of course you're going to resist. We're human beings. We have the right to resist when our freedom is taken away from us. And it's the only organic and natural thing to do, is to resist. And that's what people are doing. In terms of the things you were mentioning, Nomiki, one of the things that was going around was Palestinians trading children. And what that means is, like, a Palestinian and let's say like me and my brother and me and my sister, and we both have kids. I'd give you 2 of my kids, you'd give me 2 of yours, so that if I died with my family, at least some of my kids are still alive, and vice versa. And also people wrote about how, there's been 3 major attacks on Gaza before this one, 2009, 2012, and 2014. And in 2014 in particular, it lasted 51 consecutive days. And a lot of people were thinking this was going to be just like that before the ceasefire was announced. But during the first few days of the bombing last week, some people in Palestinian Gaza went on Twitter and were writing how there was a 20-minute interval that they said was worse than the last 3 attacks on Gaza combined. And that's just because the number of bombs, where it was bombing, the types of weapons they're using. We actually still don't know the details about these new weapons that they might be using, new bombs that they might be using. So I think all of this just shows that Israel is equipped technologically, leading in all of this in the world. And in Gaza, it's Palestinians trying to survive and trying to resist this ongoing occupation for 73 years.
And just to be clear, if you live in Gaza and you're Palestinian, you have nowhere to go.
You have nowhere to escape. Nowhere to go.
How about the conditions in terms of just outside of when Israel is attacking? What is it like, in terms of water supply? What is it like to be able to move around? I mean, just what is it? How does someone survive in Gaza on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, that's the thing. It's the question is, like, how long can Palestinians survive like this when imports and exports are severely restricted? Really random things are put on lists that on blacklists. Israel says these can't be imported in. So, for example, in 2014, when the bombings happened, when Israel led this 51-day assault on Gaza, a large percentage of Gaza's infrastructure was completely dismantled, completely ruined. I mean, just razed to the ground. And the construction supplies that you need to rebuild that, Israel wouldn't allow them in because they said they're going to be used to make bombs. And so it's like you level this entire area of land where 2 million Palestinians are living. It's one of the most densely populated places on earth. And then you say, we're not going to give you the material. We're not going to allow you to rebuild it. And we're just going to keep bombing you every few years. And then, there's one of the main water sanitation plants was bombed. So there's very, very little clean drinking water. They rely a lot on the agriculture that exists there. But again, every time there's a bombing campaign and with the lack of water, it means there's very little food. that they can rely on to survive and to, I mean, more to survive, just to like go through everyday life. And all the while, any sort of funding that people can send has to go through all sorts of hoops, because the US continues to label a lot of the funds raised for Palestinians as support for terrorism. And I think this all goes back to the war on terror rhetoric, the Islamophobia, and how Israel and the US use that to justify the ongoing oppression of Palestinians. And one thing I'll add too is just that what Palestinians have been really clear about in the last few weeks is that, of course, funds are important, especially in Gaza, where for hospitals and for other things, you need funds to rebuild that. You need funds for the machines that you need for people to survive, etc. But also, Palestinians are saying our cause is not a humanitarian cause. Our cause is a political cause. It's about ending occupation. It's about ending settler colonialism. And that means the main ask, especially of people in the United States, is to end US funding for what Israel is doing, to end funding for apartheid, to end funding for the oppression that they're facing. And that's why this motion to block the $735 million to Israel is really, really important. And that's why HR 2590, the Palestinian Families and Children Act, is also really important, because it says you can't use US funds for home demolitions. You can't use US funds for land theft or for the detention of children. It's so basic. It's so basic, and it's enraging that this is our starting point, that we have to convince people that Palestinians deserve to live, that they just deserve to live and deserve to keep their homes, and not have a settler from Brooklyn move in and tell them, actually, this is my home. You and your grandmother, who's been here for 70 years, need to leave.
What's interesting to me, and I'm not advocating for this, but I'm thinking in terms of why so cruel, is if they had opened up Gaza just a bit, if you're bombing and you don't have water supply and you're losing land and it's becoming more and more unlivable. I'm sitting here on the island of Puerto Rico right now, and I can tell you this is exactly what's happening here. Puerto Ricans, every day, Puerto Ricans are finding it that it's more and more difficult to live here because of austerity, because of the crises after crises after crises, and yet rich people are coming in, taking it over. But I wouldn't go as far to say refugee crisis, but there was at one point, but there is a diaspora that's growing, leaving for opportunity. What I don't understand is, if their goal is just to take over the territory, why not go that route instead of literally bombing the hell out of? I mean, it is cruel. It is absolutely, as people said, it's a genocide. And if you have a goal to take over the land, there are many strategies to get to that goal. I'm not in favor of any of them. Let me make that very clear. But why the genocide route?
Well, I think when it comes to Gaza at this point, actually, I think Israel wishes that Gaza just didn't exist. I don't think they even are concerned with taking that land at this point, because they have the coast, they have the fertile land. I think what they want is to quite literally just erase it from existence, because it's a thorn in Israel's neck, it's or side, whatever that phrase is. Whereas with the West Bank, it wants to take it all over. And in Israel, all these occupied Palestinian cities, it wants to just erase the Palestinian identity from them and take it over. And that's why they're expanding all these settlements into the West Bank, and they're growing larger and larger. And that's why this idea of a two-state solution really is an illusion. It's not actually what Israel wants, and it's not what Palestinians want, because Palestinians want full decolonization. As do any colonized people, as do any oppressed people. They want to be fully free. They don't want to be partially free.
And they want to be able to self-determine. Where do you think this is going to go? The international community is growing more angry. Biden's feeling the pressure from different angles. Netanyahu is now feeling the pressure. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that we don't let up, that we don't slow down just because there's a ceasefire and act as though, okay, now we can just stop, things are back to normal. That back to normal means actually just ongoing occupation. That's what back to normal is, and we don't want that. And that right now we have this really critical opportunity where more and more people are waking up and seeing what Israel is and seeing it for what it is, and tying the Palestinian struggle for freedom to other struggles, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's climate justice, imperialism. You said you're in Puerto Rico right now. AOC's speech in Congress last week, where she tied the bombs falling on Gaza to what she heard growing up in Puerto Rico when she would hear the bombs falling from the US military training drills. I think all of this is opening up so many opportunities, and we need to seize them because they're not going to be around for long. And we need to really push for ending full US funding. And for states all around the world, but in particular the US, which is the world's largest imperial country, to divest from Israel, to stop doing these deals from Israel, to fully divest, to call for sanctions, to boycott Israel, because that's the only way we're going to pressure it to end what it's doing. It's not going to end on its own. We've just seen it become more and more right-wing.
Last question. There's a dance that Netanyahu's playing with Russia. Is there fear that Russia could provide the resources that the U.S. may potentially, if the U.S. divests, that Russia could provide the resources?
I mean, all options are on the table. I think that because of the role of the U.S. right now, if we were able to fully defund Israel and stop this flow of money from the U.S. in particular, that would reverberate with states all around the world and would pressure even big states like Russia not to do this because it wouldn't be profitable for itself. But I also think that as the resistance grows in Palestine, the Palestinian resistance is connected to all of these other revolts happening in the Middle East, that sort of ebb and flow. And so it's going to have an effect on Syria, on Jordan, on Lebanon, on Egypt, and here in the US as well, on really growing and expanding the left. So I think there's a lot of different options on the table, but I think what we really need to do is take this moment seriously and push a lot further than we have in the past for sanctions and for divestment from Israel.
Sumaya Awad, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being honest and open with everything, because it's a very tough time. And I hope that your family is safe as well, and your friends.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right. Oh, we have her book. Let's go check out Sumaya's book. It is called, she's the co-editor of Palestine: A Socialist Introduction from Haymarket Books, and she's the director of strategy at the Adala Justice Project. Go check out her book. She writes for Jacobin. Check it out. Yes. At Haymarket. Go buy it at Haymarket. All right. Guys, I hate to move to an ad, but this is real stuff. There's a reason why the companies that support us. They have courage. And Sunset Lake CBD in particular is one of those companies that is not afraid of advertising in shows like ours when we talk about things like Palestine. That doesn't happen in corporate media. We know exactly what happens in corporate media. We all know Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. Sunset Lake CBD has all types of products for everyone, whether it's tinctures or salves or gummies or coffee or lotion or dog biscuits to chill out your anxious dog like Bijou. They took a farm in Vermont, the Ben & Jerry's farm, so lots of progressive juju there. And they decided to diversify and grow premium hemp there. When you support Sunset Lake CBD, you are supporting sustainable agriculture that enhances these rural communities that have just been under so much austerity. And they create meaningful employment in those communities. And they do things like have an actual livable minimum wage at $15 an hour, and the employees own the majority of the company. On top of all that, they support shows like ours and David Pakman's and The Majority Report. They've got some good values there. But go check them out because they have a new product. They have CBD dog biscuits. Sam Cedar ate them. So if you are into dog biscuits, it's only peanut butter, pumpkin, and oat flour. You can try them out, or you can have your four-legged friend try it out. I have been doing a lot. I was very stressed out yesterday, and I didn't even put the tincture in my coffee or my tea or my water. I just dropped it in my mouth. I had a very stressful day yesterday. I have a lot of stress going on right now because we're doing the documentary, and I'm just always if somebody's late, then it just has that domino effect. And I mean, look at me, I never wear a blazer, and I'm wearing a blazer right now because I had a meeting before. My hair is back. I didn't even get show ready. Oh gosh, there's worse things in life. Producer Dorsey.
I was gonna say I like to. I've been making a little cocktail at the end of the night before I go to bed of the tincture, and I like to have a little apple cider vinegar before I go to bed. And the taste with it together it's kind of nice. If I dilute it with enough water, it's like a kind of like a little switchel at the end of the night. So
Look at
that's
that.
My current little cocktail.
What does the apple cider vinegar do?
It's good for your gut. It kind of like restores and helps with the digestion after, dinner or whatever, at the end of the night before I go to bed. Just go ahead and have that, and don't have any kind of like indigestion while I'm sleeping or any. I have a lot of heartburn too. It seems to help with that, which is crazy because it's a vinegar, which is acidy, but it works in the gut. So anyway, that with the tincture, I'm just like, I'm feeling pretty good.
A little cocktail hour minus the cocktail.
Well,
it.
I guess you can make it into a cocktail somehow, probably just with vodka. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the teetotaler version.
I'm inspired. I'm having a date with myself tonight. I literally put it on the calendar because I have so much. I just was like, I can't be around people. I can't be distracted. I just need to be like alone with my thoughts and catching up on work, basically. But I'm making myself. I'm like literally making a date with myself. I'm gonna make myself like a big meal. So now I'm inspired to have a CBD mocktail, I guess. No, I'll probably put alcohol in it too.
It'll go with anything, I'm sure.
Let's be real. I'm going to put CBD in my wine.
I mean, if it's making my apple cider vinegar taste good, it'll taste pretty good with anything, I'm sure.
I will report back to you. Let's see what the mix of Malbec and CBD tastes like.
I can't wait to hear. Maybe I'll try it.
Okay, next week we'll talk about that. All right, guys, go to sunsetlakecbd.com and type in NOMI, N-O-M-I. You get 20% off of your entire order. All of the products we've tried, we love. I have joint pains, aches and pains. Go check out their salve. I use it all the time. The gummies help you with sleep. Everything is fantastic. It's high quality. It's not like the Bodega CBD that I was buying before and I didn't like. This is great stuff and affordable. And of course, if you go to sunsetlakecbd.com and type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, you get 20% off of your entire order. Yay! It's Femme Friday. We have a panel here. All right, let's take a really quick break, and we'll be right back with our amazing panel of Hadas Their and Julia Rock.
A little while before we went into lockdown, a boy in my class came up to me and said that his dad told him to stay away from Chinese people. After I told him that I was Chinese, he backed away from me. Eloise and I wrote the song based on that experience.
So this is about him and all the other racist, sexist boys in this world. 1, 2, 3, 4!
A little while before we went into lockdown.
I am obsessed with them. I have watched that video like 50 times. They can't be real. They cannot be real. They're too good. And they make me have so much hope for society. All right. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Femme Friday. We have Julia Rock. She's a reporter with the Daily Poster. Go check out and subscribe to the Daily Poster. It was created by David Sirota. It's a grassroots-funded investigative journalism project that covers politics, business, and corporate power. I read it every day. And Hadas Their is joining us. She is the author of A People's Guide to Capitalism, an introduction to Marxist economics. And she is a regular contributor to Jacobin and a member of DSA Brooklyn. All right, it's Femme Friday. Texas is real effed up. Okay, you missed your first period. You don't want to keep the baby. Oh well, you got it, no matter what. Let's play this clip of Governor Greg Abbott, just a champion of rights and freedom, all that kind of freedom. Whoop, it's on mute, Dorsey. Sound. Hold up 1 second. Let's try that again. Oops, still can't hear. Got a little glitch today. The sound.
Give me just a second. I'm not sure what's going on here. Sorry about that.
All good. I mean, do we really even need the sound? We know what he did. He signed the law. The guy's a fascist. All right, let's start with Hadas. What does this mean?
This is the law in Texas around abortion rights. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's outrageous and disgusting and not surprising, but it's terrible news for women in Texas, and it's terrible news for women around the country, because this is part of an overall trend. This is part of the right wanting to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I think it's also part of a trend of, the Republicans don't have much of a leg to stand on around economic issues right now, because stimulus spending is so popular and, infrastructure spending is so popular. And I think we're going to just see so much of this, just attacks on women, attack on abortion rights, attacks on trans people. That's where they feel like they have the ability to mobilize their base, and they're just going for broke right now. And I think, it's disgusting, and we need to, figure out how to fight for it tooth and, fight for abortion rights, full abortion rights, tooth and nail.
It's so interesting you say that, because, if they hadn't gerrymandered the hell out of the country and if the Democrats had, I don't know, maybe invested in states or something and tried to win state legislatures, it may not work. But it's like the perfect storm of, we make progress on all these other issues, these economic issues that we're trying to make a case for decades, and suddenly the crises of this moment created an opportunity for Democrats to actually, do a little something. But simultaneously, they're going hard right on these other issues that they've created this perfect storm scenario for. Julia, I mean, when the Republicans are thinking so far into the future, and it's not looking like we're going to be, Democrats are going to win any, and progressives are going to win back these legislatures anytime soon, and that redistricting is not going to be, advantageous to us, and Democrats might lose the House in the midterms. How do we fight this? And of course, the Supreme Court. How do we fight this while also dealing with, the immediate crisis that we're facing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a huge part of the story definitely is the Supreme Court, and this hearing on a case that could overturn Roe v. Wade was kind of the impetus for this Texas legislation. And I think it's probably going to kind of bring into focus once again what Biden can do on the court, and kind of the issue of Justice Breyer retiring while there is a Democrat in the White House and while Democrats have the Senate. There was some news, I think it was last month, about Biden kind of setting up a commission to study court packing, but that doesn't really, setting up a commission doesn't really suggest any action. But I think that really is, that was the big issue during the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearings, and that is kind of what Democrats should be focusing on again when it comes to the court. It is kind of the only way to take back the Supreme Court. Otherwise, the conservatives have a really, really long stronghold.
Do you think that this is sort of putting Biden in a corner where he's going to actually have to pressure Sinema and Manchin to end the filibuster? There's certain wedge issues that are so strong with mainstream Democrats that it seems like there's nowhere to hide. Biden's got to step up, Schumer's got to step up, and I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to see what kind of political dynamics you guys think have to play out to be able to get Manchin and Sinema to act like Democrats.
Do you mean on abortion or on the Supreme Court? Or
on everything, on all these democratic reforms that need to happen so that, we can, these fights that Democrats have been fighting and using as their own wedge issues for 40 years suddenly are at risk. And, people beyond the progressive base and people beyond the progressive centrist base, really like the centrist Democrats, the normies, are not going to be willing to stand for this, and they're becoming awakened. So there's a moment where don't you think they're going to say, Biden, step up? This is your party. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's certainly getting a lot of pressure from progressives within the party to kind of take action on these reforms like HR 1 that won't pass unless Democrats eliminate the filibuster. And I think that is something they're going to have to turn up the heat on. It does seem like Manchin is maybe open to something like filibuster reform, but isn't budging on HR1, which is that voting rights reform legislation, which is pretty alarming. But yeah, I think a lot of it is going to have to come from progressives who are already elected to Congress or kind of from the progressive base outside of Washington.
Hadas, do you think that that's it? Are the progressive base enough?
Well, that definitely has to be the starting point, because it's actually, the centrist Democrats have been terrible on these issues. It's not just that they haven't put up enough of a fight. It's that they have been part of rolling back abortion rights and not standing up to all the incremental attacks on abortion rights over the last couple of decades. They've rolled over on it again and again. And so they've really disarmed themselves, and a lot of the kind of liberal wing of the feminist movement has been disarmed along with them. The backtracking on, instead of saying, actually abortion without apologies, free abortion on demand, the kind of things that we saw at the height of the women's rights movement, it's basically abortion with apologies. And that, we want to make abortion, legal and rare, or I can't remember the motto, but it's, basically to backtrack on the issue, on the morality of the issue or what have you, and to try to tinker around the edges to maintain, some kind of abortion rights or the facade of abortion rights. And so there's been a real, shift to the right in the Democratic Party, in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And so it's going to have to come from the more progressive wing. And I think, the good thing for the left right now is that Biden is dependent on the progressives in a way that he hasn't been in the past. So things that I never would have expected to be possible are showing to be possibly possible. So, I think that there is possibility there, but it has to be organized.
I want to shift gears real quick because the Republican Party is, I wouldn't say in disarray, but beholden to a base of total nutcases. Every form of a denier / insurrectionist and Cider, etc. The View. It is Fun Friday, so this is when we put up our View clips because they're just so enjoyable to assess. There was a little bit of a debate between Meghan McCain, who I think thinks of herself as the leader of the old school Republican Party, I guess, and Joy Behar, who, I don't know, is a comedian. Let's play this clip.
Can I please ask Meghan a question? Sure. Can I ask you a question, Meghan? Because you're right. You know more about what's going on in your party than I do.
My sister-in-law is an advisor to Kevin McCarthy. I have a lot of friends and family who work on Capitol Hill. Like a lot.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So
okay,
what's the question?
Hold on. My question is, if it's not the Republican Party, shall I call it the QAnon Party? What shall I call your party now, who defends people like Matt Gaetz and goes against Liz Cheney? What are we supposed to call it?
I think you can call it whatever you want because your influence in the Republican Party is almost zero. And again, as I've said on this show, it is for us to figure out amongst ourselves. What Republican is like, Joy Behar doesn't like my party? Oh, God, I better stop voting for them now.
You know what,
really,
Meghan,
the same way I have no influence on the left. I don't think, at least.
Yes, but you often on this show give your opinion of what the Democrats should be doing with themselves to better themselves.
But you said that people on Capitol Hill, are supporting him. I'm telling you, from people that I know personally, they are embarrassed. This is embarrassing for the Republican Party.
Okay, then why don't they get rid of him?
They should, because
why don't they get him off his committee?
Because they have to convict him or whatever. I'm not a lawyer. They have to. What is it? They have to. The police have to arrest him. I don't know enough about it, but they have to arrest him and charge him. That's why he's still in Congress.
They didn't have any problem. They didn't have any problem taking Liz Cheney off her committees without any further investigation.
Liz Cheney, but that's a different thing. Liz Cheney wasn't on the committee. She was the third-ranking member, and
suddenly they need proof.
Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Sunny has a legal note that she needs to read right now. So, Sunny, would you do me a favor, please, and read your legal note?
Every single day.
I do have a legal note.
Oh my God!
We're going to break.
Okay, so this is entertaining, of course, for people who like to watch spectator sports, but But the reality is that this, as much as the Republican Party is not our party, we should be concerned that like they can't keep their house in order in some ways because, with the fact that there might not be a commission about the fact that they lynched the vice president in January, and that I started off the show talking about how I was on Fox News, and they were having this conversation about they're like trying to take the COVID fight, right? They don't want the COVID fight to end. Now that COVID, people are getting vaccines, they're now making it about, oh, Big Pharma wants to make money off of vaccines, so don't take the vaccine. They just want to continue this fight to keep their base alive. But the reality is this base is holding us completely hostage as a country, especially when Kevin McCarthy and McConnell, are letting it happen. So my question is, what if we created a map of the craziest effing Republicans and just targeted the hell out of them? Are the progressives spending too much time or not enough time taking on these QAnon nutcases? I mean, obviously, AOC's had her own little things in Congress with them, but are we not spending enough time focusing on that? Are we too distracted, or are we? Where are we in terms of our energy? Do we think that are we taking them seriously enough? I guess is the question, Hadas.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think you're right that we need to absolutely take the QAnon forces and so on seriously. We need to figure out what our approach is. I would say, I think that the fact that at the top of the Republican Party that they're falling apart is probably a positive development. It's a good thing, because the weaker the Republican Party is, the more that it opens up space actually for progressives within the Democratic Party, because you no longer have this like the boogeyman of a strong Republican Party. So you can fight harder within the primaries, et cetera. I think that the Republican Party being a mess and kind of falling in on itself is overall a positive development. But I think that the left needs to, not address itself to the like hard right and the QAnon folks, but I think needs to address itself to people that have been disaffected by the status quo and that have, shifted rightward. I mean, some of the profiles of the people that took part in the Capitol Hill insurrection, that they actually, they weren't, surprise, born right wingers. I mean, people who were union members, people who were organized. I mean, all sorts of folks that have been, really disillusioned, disempowered, et cetera, over the last umpteen years. And the left has not provided enough of an alternative. Now that's beginning to change, but I think that's sort of what we need to have, like a much more aggressive posture about, what our vision is that we're putting forward, and what do we put forward as an alternative to those sort of like crazy right-wing conspiracy theories. The bolder our vision and the more clarity that we have on our side, the more it disarms the appeal of the right-wing conspiracy theories.
Can you unbrainwash them though? After they've gone down that rabbit hole? And Julia and also neither one, you can jump in.
I mean, yeah, I would agree with all of the points that Hadas just made, and kind of circle back to something that I think you said earlier on about Biden's stimulus being really, the American Rescue Plan stimulus being really popular. And I just think that, like, from a governing perspective, Biden, and the Democrats really have an opportunity to be passing policies that are really popular to the types of people who also might be kind of getting washed up in these theories. So, I don't really know anything about kind of talking people out of a conspiracy theory, but I think that in terms of like building a base of popular support and kind of achieving the ultimate goal of, defeating the Republican Party, that policies, that put cash in people's pockets and lift people out of poverty, that's what is going to build a broader base of support among the Democrats and kind of pull people away from those, compelling conspiracy theories that kind of explain, what has gone wrong in politics and in the world.
Great pivot. Go ahead, Hadas.
No, and I was just going to say, I agree with that, all that. And I would just add too, around a lot of these issues, there's like people that are super hardened and like, yeah, it's hard to imagine exactly how that would unravel, but there's a lot of people in between, there's a lot of, anti-vax sentiment is not just on the right, I mean, there's a lot of skepticism and there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of, understandable skepticism, obviously, of the pharmaceutical industry, but also the role of the government and health concerns and around, the history of what this government has done in relation to people of color, African-American people, all of those things. Like, we need to push for really widespread education campaigns that should be coming through community organizations and schools and churches, et cetera. Like, we need to be pushing for really like an aggressive and approach that doesn't just write people off, but actually tries to win over people around these kinds of positions.
It's a really great pivot because I just want to end on one thing. My favorite person to take on is Joe Rogan, because he has the largest podcast in the world, and he got several hundreds of millions of dollars to put this podcast on by Spotify. So it is not a small podcast. He may not call himself a journalist. He may say it's his opinions, but he has a huge, his platform is so influential. And I think, before we show the story that he's always in the news for saying something provocative, obviously, but around the vaccine stuff, I mean, that's a perfect example. If Joe Rogan, maybe he's being influenced by someone that I'm not aware of, but if he were to be, I don't know, lobbied by folks in the science, and if Dr. Fauci had maybe like called him up, or somebody else who has more information and really worked with him, or even went on the show to talk him through some of his beliefs surrounding, started with masks when he was, he had Elon Musk on and they didn't really trust that COVID was a real thing, and that masks worked. And now it's about the vaccine. But, this is problematic because on one hand, there is this in-between space. I don't know what they are. Maybe they're libertarian, maybe they're not, where they're pulling people from the left in and maybe sucking them in it's like a pipeline to the conspiracy theorists. I don't know how many people end up there. But at the same time, the government could be doing a much better job of pressuring pharmaceutical companies to maybe put their money into research and development instead of, stock buybacks, but also getting the message out, like you said, to communities that should not and have rightful reason not to trust the government because of what they've been doing. But also, these folks. So let's just show this Joe Rogan, because there's also the
You can never be woke enough. That's the problem. It keeps going. It keeps going further and further and further down the line. And if you get to the point where you capitulate, where you agree to all these demands, it will eventually get to straight white men are not allowed to talk.
Right.
Because it's your privilege to express yourself when other people of color have been silenced throughout history. It will be, you're not allowed to go outside because so many people were imprisoned for so many years. I mean, I'm not joking.
No, I know.
So we do this show on Fridays because the majority of the left political YouTube, and I don't even know what the right is male. And when I say male, I mean like 80%, 80, 90%. So we want to have these conversations, and this is our most popular show, which is awesome. But so that we can have these conversations, because that is the norm. Like, let's just put this out there. Fox News, which we have a lot of reasons to criticize. Fox News at least has female hosts. They at least have a split audience. But these spaces now do not. They are overwhelmingly male dominated. They're overwhelmingly male hosted, watched, and they're shifting the conversation into the mainstream. So, Julia, what I love about the Daily Post is you guys do cover big tech and you do talk about these issues. Where are we in I mean, I know there have been hearings about taking on big tech in terms of their power, but are we having enough of the conversation around just the insurrection? Obviously is one example, and QAnon is one example, but even just equity and who's watching, who's shifting the conversations, who's on air, who's making the money. There was the woman who was hired by Google to address the algorithm and then was fired as soon as she said it's racist and it's sexist. Julie, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of the some of the problems you're describing in media right now, and then some of the problems, about kind of big tech consolidation. I think it's been really interesting and kind of disheartening week in media for thinking about this type of thing. There was the example of Chris Cuomo partaking in really blatantly unethical behavior and kind of not being reprimanded, and then a really young journalist at the Associated Press losing her job for being affiliated and organizing with Students for Justice in Palestine as a college student. And I think, those kind of inequities that take place along gender and race lines, and kind of specifically around the issue of Israel and Palestine, are kind of massive problems for media, and definitely what we're hoping to kind of fight against at the Daily Poster, being, funded by readers and subscribers, and kind of holding ourselves to standards that aren't simply, present both sides of every issue as the same. I think it definitely is related to the issue you're talking about of consolidation in the tech industry as well. But I kind of do think that the way to fight back is just to be building better institutions, and to be, bringing people in, whether it's through their workplaces, through organizing, or, through religious institutions or other means that people are already kind of involved in, and presenting better information. But honestly, yeah, it was a really disheartening week, and I'm not sure I have that many answers right now.
I mean, as somebody who's building an institution, it is an uphill battle. When I did cable news, our ratings were I knew which segments I was on. It wasn't about me. It was about, we knew exactly what worked and didn't. And then when you come into these spaces with the algorithms, you're on the left, you're a woman, you're a person of color. How nice of you to join. Meanwhile, Ben Shapiro and his squeaky voice and his conspiracy theories, and Dan Bongino, whatever, can dominate these spaces and make literally millions of dollars a month. Hadas, I mean, is it just about institutions? Like there has to be a point where, I'm listening to some of these hearings on Capitol Hill, and I'm like, okay, cool. Now they finally understand that the internet works. It's a thing. Congratulations. By the time they catch up, I mean, they literally went to Congress to kill them. And they're still like, well, Facebook does donate a lot of money to my campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a long slog, and I think it's all connected, like you're saying. It's like there's the role of big tech, and there's we have the pretense in social media of like there's some way to get around like the major news outlets. It's not all about Fox anymore, et cetera. But then we have private companies that are run by all sorts of conservative forces and so on, and they are completely unaccountable, and there's no transparency. These things really should be considered public goods, that should be under public scrutiny. And so you have all of that going on, and you have all of the economic realities where women are being left out of the workforce, or leaving the workforce, or still getting paid 82 cents to the man's dollar, or even more so when you start talking about around racial lines, Black women, or the differences between moms and dads, all of that, the whole list of things. But we're up, and we started out by talking about the attack on abortion rights. Like, we are up against a fundamentally sexist society and infrastructures. It's a long slog, and it's going to require us, fighting at every level. And I think there's windows and there's pockets of change that we can really get behind. And you mentioned about what's happening on Capitol Hill. I was incredibly inspired last week to see the discussion about Palestine, led by Rashida Tlaib and AOC and Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, all of these folks, that are, these are women, these are working class women, and these are women of color who were absolutely not groomed to take power. They are the opposite of having been groomed to take power. They're getting a lot of heat for it, especially from the right. But, we have a real opening and opportunity there to support that, to build solidarity, to push for more. I think it's part of a whole picture that needs to be tackled.
All right. Final thoughts. Julia, have any final thoughts?
I'm not going to follow that. I think those are great points.
Agreed. More working class women in office, less Joe Rogan, more working class women. And does anybody know if there's any sort of DSA organizing around challenging big tech? Because I feel like this is worse than like the 70s.
That's a very good question that I wish I knew the answer to, and I'm not sure.
We'll look into it, but
definitely
needs to be more organizing. Julie Rock, thanks for joining us. Go check out the Daily Poster. Hadas Theer, she's an amazing activist with DSA Brooklyn, but she's also the author of A People's Guide to Capitalism: An Introduction to Marxist Economics. I think I told you my friend's 13-year-old daughter was reading it.
That is so awesome.
I know. I was like, oh man. She's reading Chomsky too. I'm like, no, you gotta wait. Like you have to mature your thoughts a little bit first, but
I would gladly go on any reading list alongside of Chomsky.
Yes, that's very good. 13-year-old reading list. All right, thank you guys so much for joining us for Fem Friday. We have a couple of shout outs. Let me go through here really quick. Okay, who do we have here? Ken M. You are such a giver, Ken. Thank you so much for all of your love. Yog Greghoff says, does Nomi like Barbera wine? I just got into it. I do like Barbera wine. Am I going to go on my wine rant? Okay. All of the servers of the world that ever have to serve me, being a former server, I understand, and a bartender, a cocktail waitress. I am really particular with alcohol, and it's because as I get older, if I mix, I get incredible migraines, I get migraines already, which I think a lot of you know, but then they get really, really bad if I mix, and I could just have like 2 glasses, or I can't even go on a wine tasting anymore, because if I mix blends, if I mix white and red, I get really bad migraines. So I'm always the driver. But in particular with wines, which is my choice, my alcohol choice normally, I stick with certain regions, and Italian can be hit or miss. I like Barbera. I like, Barbera is great. What's the other one I really like from Italy? Oh my God, I'm losing it right now. But I tend to drink, Malbecs are the most drinkable. Carboneras are incredibly drinkable for me. I don't get headaches. And it's because of how, unfortunately, I don't drink any US wines. I'm sorry, US, it's the worst. But it has to do with not just the sulfites, but the pesticides and how the water sources work. And they've banned a bunch of this stuff in different parts of the world. So Spanish I do well with, South African I do well with. I can't believe I'm doing this right now. Chilean I do well with. Basically anything in South America I do pretty well with. South African I said, New Zealand, Spanish, some parts of Italy, but not all. French, no thank you. Greek I do when I'm in Greece, but honestly I don't do great with them either. I think that's pretty much it. Am I missing anything? I don't know what Dorsey probably doesn't know. Oh, Turkish wines are actually really good as a Greek. Don't tell anybody I said that. All right, that's enough about the wine, but we could do a whole segment on wine. All right, Alex Orlowski says there should be a modern garbage people of the week segment, modern garbage people of the week segment on the show, solely covering Joe Rogan, toxic masculine gas. You know what? We should do this because I'm not, people are like, oh, Joe's not. No, he's not. He has the most popular podcast in the world. The amount of attention people focus on Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, not enough is on Joe Rogan, what he said is insane. And just because he says something a little bit more like left one day of the week, or has somebody who's leftist or normie on another, it's a slow roll. It's an indoctrination program. Not to mention that these spaces are completely undemocratic. And this is a major crisis. When Fox News is more democratic than come on, at least they... Yes, we'll think about that. All right, Craven James says, Joe had to say, I'm not joking in that clip because none of his jokes have ever been funny. Yes, that's because of the steroids. Shout outs to everyone in that live chat. Thank you so much. There were quite a bit of trolls out today, and not just with our show. I think Majority Report also had them. So thank you to all of our moderators. Thank you to the algorithm patrollers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure, if you are not already, to like and subscribe on our channel on YouTube. And of course, as always, join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Tune in Monday. Episode 4 of the committee program is on. You can check out the previous episodes Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and Twitch till 6 p.m. It's incredible. They've been up to some really good stuff. Go check them out on social media. Check us out on social media as well, as you know. And with that, have a wonderful weekend. And as always, stay in solidarity.
Thank you all.
Also here
Here's the
tonight,
full
Nomiki
clip
Konst.
of my
She's
Fox
the host
hit.
of The Nomiki Show. Nomiki, thank you for being with me tonight. You just heard the numbers. I just did the tally while Jason was speaking. $5.6 billion in revenue to Big Pharma so far through the COVID-19 vaccine. I've read your Twitter feed. I've seen a lot of your comments, Nomiki. You've been pretty aggressive. You've said that conservatives or anyone else who has questions about the vaccine are anti-vaxxers. You pointed Joe Rogan, I believe, once and called him an anti-vaxxer. Is it wrong to have questions about the motivations of this vaccine? Is it wrong right now to remain skeptical of Big Pharma?
Well, I love that you're skeptical of Big Pharma, just like Katie Porter was skeptical of Big Pharma just yesterday, who's a representative from California, a Democrat, and just like Bernie Sanders has put forward 3 pieces of legislation to rein in on Big Pharma and the fact that they're focused on profits. Listen, AbbVie, this is a pharmaceutical company, spent $1.6 billion in 5 years on research and development, yet $50 billion went to shareholders, $13 billion went to stock buybacks during that 5-year period. Their priorities are absolutely
Nomiki, that's
in the wrong
absolutely,
places.
that backs up the point. I'm sorry, Nomiki, but the question isn't why I have grown skepticism towards Big Pharma. The question is why those on the left, like yourself, have become such blind followers of Big Pharma. Why is it if you have questions... Well, Nomiki, you've been calling anyone that would question Big Pharma when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine an anti-vaxxer. When did you place your trust so blindly in people that stand to make $5.6 billion from this vaccine?
The definition of intelligence is being able to hold 2 thoughts in your head at the same time and be able to consider. Big Pharma makes a lot of money, and they're not spending enough money on research and development, which is where their priority should be.
But they should be trusted blindly on this issue?
Other pharmaceuticals are stronger. It's not blind. The science is out about the vaccines. The vaccines work. Should there be a booster? I'm no scientist, but neither is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan should not act like a scientist. Joe Rogan should not be telling people not to wear masks,
here's the
take
truth.
the vaccine.
This is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned you're a big vaccine booster now, not because you believe the science backs it up, but because the vaccine has come to represent a political ideal, a political signifier, a political fight on which you think you can win and claim the banner of science. But the wild thing about it, Nomiki, is it exposes hypocrisy so blatantly for anyone on the left right now. Do you realize that Big Pharma, when it comes to...
I think that's absolutely...
Hold on, really quickly.
Do you realize... Pharmaceutical, but that is a Bernie Sanders bill.
Do you realize that the vaccine makers...
You're supporting the left right now.
Excuse me right now. I'm supporting honest Americans having independent free thought to make a choice about what they inject into their body. And I think when the pharmaceutical companies have complete liability protection on the COVID-19 vaccine, you on the left have chosen a unique time, a really interesting time to all of a sudden call people who have questions anti-vaxxers. It was the Republicans who pushed the liability protection. It was not the Democrats. The Bernie Sanders and Katie Porter are the ones that are advocating to rein in on the pharmaceutical companies' profits so they can put more money into research and development. Which only begs the question,
do you think that we shouldn't have pharmaceuticals?
Nomiki, which only begs the question, why now did you do it? Which only begs the question, why now did you do an about face and all of a sudden say that anyone that has questions is an anti-vaxxer? Why now?
No. I think Joe Rogan is an anti-science person. There's a difference between it being an anti-vaxxer and believing that COVID doesn't exist. He did not believe COVID really existed until recently. I mean, that's the difference.
I don't think that's
fair,
nor do I think that's accurate.
Which is why pharmaceuticals should spend money on research and development and not their shareholders. That's the difference. The profit motive. The profit motive should be in science.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think that's an unfair characterization of what Joe Rogan said or what he believes. I think that you on the left have found a very unique time on an emergency use application vaccine that has complete liability protection to switch, to all of a sudden have an about face on your trust in Big Pharma. And I think you did it. I think you did it because you thought it was a win over Republicans. That's all. Nothing more, nothing deeper.
The Republicans want to keep their base. See, what's happening right now is you guys want to prolong. The pandemic is ending, and you want to keep everybody angry at COVID and the assault on freedom because you have to wear masks. God forbid you have to keep your community safe and your grandmother safe. You want to keep that going because it's been working.
I got to run, Nomiki. I want to say two things. I thank you for coming on the program. I always enjoy a spirited exchange of ideas, and I think that what I'm standing up for tonight is independent Americans having the ability to make freedom of choice, specifically on the very intimate decision of what they inject into their bodies. Thank you, Nomiki. All right, next, let's talk about La La Land.